And welcome back. Joining us for our first conversation, as I mentioned earlier, is Mr. Michael Peyrefitte, who is of course the Attorney General, and Mr. Nigel Hawke, who is the Solicitor General, here to talk to us about his new term as Attorney General and the things that they have upcoming for the ministry. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to Open Your Eyes. Thank you for being here. So, the new role, how's it going so far?
I have to remind myself most of the times that I've only been in the job for 6 weeks. It certainly feels longer than that, but if you take on the role as Attorney General in January, then and then as well as a senator, you're kind of begging for a lot of work. I mean, you have the opening of the Supreme Court, you have the budget presentation that's coming up, we had a couple Senate meetings. So it's been an exciting shift from my previous life. And the first thing that we had to do was to establish a full-fledged, full-time Solicitor General, Mr. Hawke. And so with that, we're running with the ball, and our plans is not to drop it. So Mr. Hawke enjoys a very unique position as the Solicitor General. He's the head lawyer in the ministry and head of litigation, but also the CEO of the ministry. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that. So he's in charge of administration and everything within the ministry, as well as being the lead person to go to court on behalf of the government and people of Belize. So we have a certain style. I'm learning the styles of the different personalities in the ministry. They're learning me, I'm sure, but at the end of the day, the idea is to get things done and to represent the people in court as best as we can.
Now, when you look at the fact that there is an entire office that is dedicated solely for the legal representation of the government, vis-a-vis the auditor, the Attorney General's office and the Solgen's office, I've always found it interesting, and I think it's a matter of delving into this conversation head on at this point. I've always found it interesting that despite the existence of this office, there are still cases that are being assigned to private attorneys. How does that work in terms of the workload that exists in your office and some of these more high-profile cases being given out to other attorneys?
Well, I could take that and say that coming in, we have hired one attorney to help with a particular case that we had in court for an injunction. But there are a total of about 7 or 8 lawyers who are prepared and who are willing to work full-time for the government. And you have to understand the Attorney General's ministry is not just litigation. It is the company's registry. It is Belize. It is Vital Statistics Unit. It is a number of different things, justices of the peace, a whole wide array of services that we provide. And sometimes the urgency of the cases that would come along, we simply don't have the bodies to assign them to these cases. So when I spoke at the opening of the Supreme Court, I made a plea for more people to want to come to work for the Attorney General's ministry. We need people in drafting, we need people in litigation, we need people in research, we need people everywhere. We simply don't have enough people who are prepared to work for us full time, and so we have no choice but to employ outside attorneys to take care of, especially weighty matters, because the people can't afford to lose those cases.
Is it a situation where, and maybe this is just my own perspective or thinking when I look at the matter, is it a situation where some attorneys in private life prefer what they do in that capacity because it's more profitable for them, as opposed to joining the government service and not being able to capitalize on certain cases that may be of a certain either prestige or caliber, or it doesn't have a certain financial gain that can be gotten from it?
Well, that's a part of it, and I will ask Mr. Hawke to jump in at any time, because he would have had to have interviewed people to try and convince them to work at the AG's ministry. But it's a combination of things. If you are in private practice, there is this feeling that you make more money all the time. Who can blame anybody for that, right? Secondly, there's also this stigma. If somehow I'm an attorney or I'm any professional and I join the government service while a particular party is in power, there is this feeling that you are biased towards that party or whatever. So if you join the AG's ministry in the time of the UDP, you must be UDP. If you join it in the time of PUP, you must be PUP, which is unfair. And so you have a lot of people who, in general, don't want to work for any government because they don't want the stigma attached to them that they're political, because the person may very well be apolitical. That's a part of it. I think politics is a part of it, the pay is a part of it, and not very many people want to be associated with going to Belmopan on a regular basis. Belize City people, we like Belize City, but there's only so much space here. Being involved with the government involves being in the capital, and some people don't want to commute or be a part of that traveling on a daily basis almost.
Another point that we need to make here in relation to outsourcing work, this is not something that is absolutely new and unique to Belize. This is common throughout the Caribbean. If you look throughout the jurisdictions in the Caribbean, you will see government will usually outsource work to private attorneys or law firms to assist with litigation and so on. So this is not something new. And the other point we need to make critical, a lot of times people don't know lawyers within the chambers provide critical support to those lawyers who are representing the government privately. So it's not as though we are just aloof looking on.
But I wanna just jump in a little bit there as it relates to the population of lawyers that exist in Belize. And every year, you would say that they churn out even more. How do you change that culture, that mindset? Because for a lot of people, they look at the AG's ministry as the training ground for, I'm going to work here for 2 years, I might work here for 3 years, and then I'm just going to do private practice. Like they don't see it as a potential career path of maybe being the Solgen or the Attorney General. What do you think needs to be done to change that mindset of new lawyers, of maybe even existing lawyers, to want to see their practice, their career as not just being solely beneficial for myself, but maybe beneficial for my country as well?
Well, first I think it has to do primarily with the individual. Is the individual saying to themselves, look, do I want to have a government career? Do I want to serve my country? It's a personal and subjective approach. And what we've been trying to do is build a cadre of lawyers in the chambers that we'll be able to have continuity. You don't want to build, they get some years of experience and then they leave. It is always going to be a challenge. We have to be very frank because of remuneration. It is always going to be a challenge. But the reality is, if a lawyer comes into the chambers saying, look, I want upward mobility within the Attorney General's ministry, that's the type of thing that you want to build. And apart from that, I guess we need to build in, and that's what we're thinking about, different incentives to have persons stay. It might not be money, it might be other opportunities that are available in terms of whether academic, capacity building. Those are the things we're looking at in order to see if we can have lawyers stay within the department.
When I listen to what Jamie has pointed out, I can't help but think of the fact that there are certain offices indeed that are considered, let's say, training grounds and a rite of passage to become a private practicing attorney. You look at the DPP's office, for instance. Oftentimes when people return from either Norman Manley or whichever law school, they go through the DPP's office, some go through the Solgen's office, and then you find them in private practice a few years later. You're mentioning the fact that you want to be able to incentivize either young attorneys or those who are established in the respective fields to be able to stay the course at the government level. You're mentioning academic, and you're also mentioning other opportunities that may exist for capacity building, etc. How do you foresee this in terms of being able to recruit and being able to keep those that are there?
I want to say right now, at the outset, we have a very good cadre of lawyers right now in chambers. We think they're young, but they're hardworking, and they do the job. One of the things we're thinking about almost immediately is trying to put in place a structure where if I come into the Attorney General's ministry, I can aspire perhaps to a different level of promotion. So the example I can give, perhaps you can move from a Crown Counsel to a Senior Crown.
Yeah.
Then we're trying to put in additional structure where you might move from a Senior Crown to an Assistant Solicitor General. So you have an incentive, you have something to look forward to in terms of promotion. Okay. That's one way we're thinking about changing the structure or the organizational structure of the ministry. So you have at least an aim that if I want to become Solicitor General, this is my path. This is the way I can go, right?
Well, you saw me also as well. I think it's the responsibility of everybody. It's not only our responsibility to convince an attorney to stay, for example. It's the responsibility of attorneys to develop that sense of service. I mean, where is that sense of service? For some reason, we don't see any value in it. For many reasons, the arguments are legitimate, but at the same time, how do you serve your country? I mean, you have to give credit to, for example, Commissioner Williams, Chester Williams, Mr. Barrett Jones, who recently came out, just to name a couple of them. Most of the times when people become lawyers and they were police officers, they leave the department. They've decided to stay. And I would have to assume that it is out of some sense of service. So I think what has to develop is that whole obligation, that feeling that, because most lawyers go on government scholarships or some sort of assistance, you would feel that since Belize sent you to be qualified, that you owe something to Belize to give back to the people of Belize. So I think that that's the most important thing, to make people feel like when you go to work there, it's not just a job, you're providing a service for your country.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your game plan for within your new term as Attorney General. I know that this is a huge undertaking. I'm sure you don't take it lightly. But what at the moment, do you have a roadmap, a game plan that you are working on, challenges that you've already seen, maybe new incentives like we were talking about that you'd want to implement?
Well, coming from the private sector, there's always the adjustment from private sector to public service. That's the biggest challenge. It's when you're in your private office, you need to replace the ink in your printer, and you just go to you send it to the store, you buy it, you get it. Here you have an FO, you have an FO, it has to be approved. There's a process to get from A to B for the simplest of things, and that's understandable. That's the system, and there has to be serious accountability. In private sector, you are accountable to yourself. In public sector, you're accountable to the people. So there is this traditional red tape that I'm still getting used to. My plan is simple, because for the most part, lawyers don't initiate action. As we were talking before, you are sued, or the government is sued, and then we are thrust into action to defend and to represent or to offer general advice. But my vision is this. I want the people of Belize to have immediate access to the laws of Belize.
That's what I was about to ask.
Immediate access to the laws of Belize. I would take it as a personal challenge to say that I would want, at the end of my term, for any Belizean with connection to be able to go on a computer and pull up the latest SI, the latest act that was passed, the cases that were decided in the Supreme Court that were printed out, for example. Because a lot of people, I find, are talking in public, but they're talking about what they don't know about. And it's not peculiar to the law. It upsets me when lawyers try to talk like they're plumbers or electricians. You're an electrician? No. So then left it to the electricians. So I want people to not be told what the law is. I want them to be able to go and get it for themselves and read it for themselves. That's my goal, because then everything in this new age is to have access to the law. That's the first thing. The next thing is, I want the public to feel that they can requisition the AG's ministry for an opinion, that we are open, and that you can come and ask us what the law is. Many times we get into trouble because the two of you may have an agreement and it goes sour, and then there's this big mess, and then the lawyers come in to try and clean up that big mess. We have to encourage people to, before you get into that mess, at the very beginning, seek the advice of an attorney, seek the advice of people. That's why we could segue into the legal aid and the legal resource centers that we want to set up all over the country for people to have access to the legal system. If you have a question, if you have a query, if you have a problem from very early on, legal problems are solved early in the game, not late in the game.
Late in the game is damage control.
Damage control, and it's expensive.
Yeah.
Because they know you have to have a person who has to go and read all of that, what has happened, and it takes time, it takes money. Yeah. If you want to sell your land, go to the legal aid office and get some advice. If you want to sell your car, if you want to sell anything, any transaction, seek the advice of an attorney first. You have to go first. Don't go last to the attorney.
I think one of the things when I attended the opening of the Supreme Court back in January, when I listened to your address, what caught me was the idea of the open door policy.
Yes.
Because for most people, whatever the perception may have been prior to your coming on board as the Attorney General, people felt as if though the AG and the Solicitor General's office were off limits.
Right.
And that there's this natural apprehension towards being able to seek out and access whatever services or advice that can come forward from those respective offices.
No, man. Go ahead.
But we want to say, coming off of what the AG said at the opening, what we're thinking about is delivering a quality product. And when we speak of the product, we're talking about the people of Belize, the administration of justice. You must feel as though, yes, there's some level of delivery. And we could start right away by saying, when we indicated that we know what are the problems, we know that there are serious problems in the criminal justice system, and we could tell you we've gotten approval for the appointment of 2 temporary judges to assist with the backlog in terms of the criminal side, right? So that will be rolled out sometime after April. In relation to what AG said about meeting the people, we have what we're going to deliver probably in April also is a draft manual. So the example I can give is, if you're a poor gentleman living all the way in Toledo, we're not able to meet you perhaps, but we want to produce this manual where you or someone who's able to read the document can read it to you. How can I draft my will, right? You don't necessarily need to go to a lawyer to draft a will, but we want to put something in your hands which will give you some level of power to say, well, look, if I want to draft a will, you have a single mother who's thinking about bringing an action for maintenance. What can I do? She may not know. Those are the type of things we want to make easier and accessible to ordinary poor people. And that is where legal aid comes in. So far, we rolled out legal aid in Belize City, Belmopan, Orange Walk. What we're thinking about is having legal aid in all the districts. Obviously, this will require a lot of resources, but what the AG has been saying is what we will continue to appeal. If you're a lawyer, you're a law student, and you're coming back, you have nothing to do during the summer, come provide some service to legal aid. You might not be able to go to court, but you could sit in-house under the supervision of one of the lawyers, see clients, and also under their supervision at least give some guidance, take statements. Those are the things we're trying to encourage in order to better our system in terms of delivery of justice, right?
In terms of innovation in technology, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and it's good that there are steps in place to ensure that persons do have better access to what the justice system is. But I'm thinking, for the person who may not have somebody who can read a document to them, what are the considerations made for persons in that regard, and even persons who are maybe, not inclined to being even interested in reading something because they prefer to have that one-on-one?
In that regard, this is where we're thinking about. Logistically, it will be hard to meet everybody, but this is what we're thinking about. In those far-flung villages and so on, we're thinking about sending a mobile unit out there, a mobile legal aid clinic. So we can announce in a particular village that legal aid will be coming on X day. You go there with a vehicle and you have a designated building that persons will be able to meet, whether it's a community center. So lawyers will be on the ground on that particular day to give free advice, guidance, and in cases where representation is needed, that can be facilitated. But I'm saying all this, I'm talking about a mobile facility, because I understand that there are people out there who prefers to deal with a lawyer face to face. And I've gone to far-flung villages. We're talking about accessibility, having a vehicle to go there, having the available resources to take lawyers to those places. So that's what we're thinking about in terms of meeting the needs of the people who may not have the technology. They may not be able to come, but we can go to meet them.
I hate to be the devil's advocate here, but I
No,
think
you don't. You love being the devil's advocate.
it's to raise a point nonetheless. I think there's the perception among members of the public that for them to be able to seek legal advice, they have to go the way of the private attorney. For whatever reason, whenever people think legal aid, for instance, they think, okay, well, those aren't necessarily the top tier lawyers or the ones who have established themselves and their names out there. How do you guys deal with that in terms of being able to provide or offer the services and deal with the fact that there are others who may be skeptical of what it is they're actually getting?
Well, one of the ways in dealing with that is you will always have the skeptics. That's the first thing. But one of the ways in dealing with that is having information out there. And two things we need. Right now we're in the process of rebuilding our website. There's a website development project that we're dealing with. So when AG talked about having the laws, those laws will be online and so on. But the point critically that I want to make is information flow is critical, whether by what you call a news brief, whether by pamphlets or otherwise, so persons will know that the facility is available. I think at this point, to be fair, a lot of persons in some areas may not even know that there is the existence of a legal aid and advice center. So we need to get the information out, and this is where the media will come in. We might need you to come on board and assist us with getting information out. I would say that we will have to go through a process with the Bar Association, because there is a rule that says generally lawyers are not supposed to advertise. So we will have to enter discussions with the Bar Association in terms of making probably legal aid services an exception. And it's a critical area, because you don't want the lawyers to think that the Legal Aid and Advice Center is now competing with their private practice. And that is why we need to involve the Bar Association. But certainly, I agree with you. I think if we're able to get a lot of the information out, especially with the manual and so on, I think we can make a difference. And if we're seen, the problem is a lot of times people hear, but you're not seen. If the lawyers are seen and the word gets out that information, work is being done, I think you're going to start to see a difference in terms of at least perception and so on.
And then too, Isani, it's not every legal situation that requires Dennis Bauer or Lord Lauterpack, you know. There are many cases that I have been a part of where if you had an attorney in the very, very beginning, there was not a lot of skill required. For example, in the SG spoke about earlier, a will. You know how many problems would have been saved, for example, by the matriarch or patriarch of a family had they just done a will? And how simple it is, and it costs about $100 to do a will. I mean, so many times, when, like I said, when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, you have to go to a fancy lawyer in a fancy building to get a complex job done. But that could have been avoided from the very beginning. You know, it's interesting. If the lights in here start to flicker, you say, well, let's go look for an electrician. If we see a little water leak, let's go for a plumber. But if we have a dispute, for some reason we don't say,
Let's go to
our lawyer, go sort this out. No, it's like we feel like we can sort that out ourselves. And then when it grows and grows and grows and mushrooms into something we can't control, okay, you know, let's draw for the lawyers and have them solve it. And then you complain about lawyers being too expensive and inaccessible. Well, if you have a big mess, it requires a lot to clean it up. If you have a little mess, it requires very little to clean it up. So the idea is, if you feel like there is any doubt, seek the services of the legal aid office, and they will help you. I would want to say that they're competent, capable attorneys there. Don't wait until matters get complex and complicated before you seek their services. Go early.
Another of the things that I can quickly go back to coming out of your address at the opening of the Supreme Court is the idea of the divorce. I hate to bring that up, but
No,
it was one of those features
Stop apologizing for things you're not really sorry for.
it was one of those features that struck me automatically when that presentation was made. The length of time, it's almost unreasonable that one would take so long to get a divorce, and sometimes the process itself outlasts the actual marriage or the length of the marriage. Speak to us a bit on that and in trying to move that process forward.
As a married man, you want to leave that one to me? No, listen, first of all, it was just an example. It wasn't the primary focus of the address, but we are what we are, so we will focus on what we want to focus on. It was just an example of me analyzing how things can be changed. The whole message was, if you have an idea about the current state of the law and you believe that things can be improved, if you believe that things can be different to make them more efficient, less cumbersome, less lawyerly, if you have an idea, bring it. It's like, for example, and then that was where the example of the divorce came in, because I picked one criminal situation and I picked one civil situation. And for the criminal, I said, for example, it was just a suggestion to the Chief Justice that if there's no objection to bail, and you know a judge is taking, because I've been, for example, before a judge in Dangriga, and we're in the middle of a trial, and he says, listen to me, we can't come Friday. We lose an entire day because he has to go to hear bail applications on a Friday. But then none of the applications are objected to. So the judge pretty much just gives a standard template to say, okay, report to the police station. Do you really need a judge to do that? If there are no objections, then maybe you could get the registrar to deal with that, for example. Of course, when it came to the marriage part, it was just saying, look, indeed, two people can get married before a senior justice of the peace, but yet when it's time for them to get divorced, they have to go through this long process. You have to wait for 3 years if you want to do it no fault. And then you have to, all that lot of paperwork and the expense of going to an attorney and stuff like that. It was just a suggestion on my part that these are the things that we can streamline to make situations cheaper and more efficient for the general public. It was just an example. And for me to say, look, the doors are open for ideas and for suggestions. But indeed, that one has caught on a lot of traction. There's a lot of support from the public for that particular example. And so at some point, our office will have to be brave enough to see if we can table something like that before cabinet, and see if the cabinet, as the chief policy body in the government, can support it. And if they do, then we take it to Parliament to see if Parliament would vote for such an amendment to make it easier for people to be divorced if that's what they choose to do.
Just to make the point, following on from what E.G. is saying, there's also established a body as directed by the Honorable Chief Justice, which has members of the bench and members of the bar, especially those members of the bar who would be involved in divorce matters, set up specifically to look at reform of the matrimonial rules and so on. So that is already in training on board. So soon, if not shortly, we will see some level of reform coming into the system in relation to divorces.
You know, I'm thinking,
So long you want to get divorced body, son.
for many people, I think that the justice system is very antiquated, and there are no strides to make it more accessible. There are no strides to make it seem, you know, like a part of society that they can claim as their own. How do you change the culture within the mindset of the Belizean people? Because there's, yes, the need to be changed within this, in the ministry itself and with the attorneys, but how do you change the perception of the average Belizean who sees the justice system as only being for attorneys and what they want, and the ministry and how procedures, the red tape that exists How do you change that mindset?
By explaining to them exactly what it is. You go to a doctor and you tell a doctor my shoulder is hurting. They analyze you on the spot, give you a possible solution on the spot, taking 2 pills 3 times a day, doctor done. That's not how it works in the legal system. If you ask me, for example, what is the law on any property that we may have owned before 1939? That's not an on-the-spot answer. That's not I'm not a repository for the law where I can say, listen to me, I can give you a solution right now, right on the spot, right here. It takes time. There's a process. And let me say this in terms of the media. And this is the responsibility that the media has. And this is sometimes the issues that I have with the media. Most people hear about a court case or a court situation from the media, from the news. And I have to say, and like you, I will claim to apologize for saying this, but many times I would be involved in a case and I watch the news and I hear the news reporting on that case and I wonder if that's the same case I was involved in. It is totally inaccurate. It is totally false. People, before they pass opinion on what the law is, on what the legal system is to try and take some time to observe it. Try and understand that it is not like buying upon a rice or buying upon a flour. It's not a quid pro quo on the spot. It takes time. The legal process is slow because you have to be careful. That's the first thing you need to understand. It's like when I was in criminal defense, they say, Mr. Peyrefitte, my son is in jail. Can you go to the police station and take him out? No, man. It doesn't work that way. It's my job then to explain that the police has the right to hold an individual for 48 hours, 24 hours before they even explain to you why they have you held. So people have this perception that is totally wrong. And so I think what they need to do is to learn how the system works, learn what are the rules. Unfortunately, we are a society, and I'm very much a part of that society. And most people believe that you can just do what you want, but you can't just do what you want. There are rules and regulations, and they're not always comfortable, but they are done for the best interest of the people. And we have to make people understand that there is a procedure when it comes to the law. It is not a quick fix.
The other point I want to just make is, I believe that in relation to the judicial system, we understand what are the problems, but I am of the firm view that you have to judge it based on results, right? So if we're able to impact, let's take one example. The example where we have a large backlog in relation to the criminal side, and you have a lot of persons on remand. If come next year, we're able to say that that population has been reduced by 20%, we would then say, well, look, what we're doing is working, it's effective. It may not impact 90% of the public, it might only impact 20% of the public, but as the AG is saying, it takes time because you have to go through processes. But the fact remains, if we look at the evidence that we see it's working, it means that we're on the right course, and that is what we want to try to do, deliver a product of quality that members of the public can feel, yes, I'm seeing change. I'm seeing change. It's slow, but I'm seeing change.
Within your years of service, what would you say, what would you classify as some of the major wins for the ministry? I know this, I wouldn't put that question on you because it's been only 6 weeks, but I know, Mr. Hawke, you've been there for a number of years. So what would you say are some of the major wins?
I think we've been able to develop a system in the ministry thus far for us to deliver quality service to the government and the people of Belize, because we serve the government, we serve the people. So there have been complaints, and there may still be complaints that, look, we can't get all our work out to you at the time that you say you will get it out. But I think there has been a substantial improvement in terms of the quality of the product and the delivery of the product, right, over time. And when I speak of that, remember the AG's chambers are divided into drafting, litigation, and international legal affairs. In all those areas, I think we've made tremendous strides, right? In terms of staff, I think we have a cadre of young people there right now that we can try to work with and build. So those are the type of positives that I can speak to. And yes, people somehow have this perception it is not always, and this is what we need to understand, it's not always about winning a case. Winning a case is important, but making sure justice is served in the end is what we are trained to do as lawyers. I'm not saying for 1 second that we shouldn't try to win, but it is critical that we ensure that the administration of justice was fair in all the circumstances. I think if we go along that path, and when I look at what we've done so far, I can say that we're getting there. We're not quite there yet. I won't be a person to boast of perfection, but based on what I've seen over the years in the ministry, we've made tremendous strides.
Gentlemen, this has been quite an interesting conversation. I'm certain that we could sit here and continue discussing other aspects of the work that you guys do. But once again, it's been an interesting conversation, and we bring this segment now to an end, Jamie, and we get ready for another conversation that will be held following the commercial break, and that one will involve the Wildlife Conservation Society on the spawning aggregate review for 2016 or 2017.
And we're always saying, Sonny, not to cut you off, where we're available, and I've introduced the Solicitor General to your show, and he's not one to be too public, but I think it's time that we start to see the faces in the ministry, and especially since too, from now on, you can harass him to come on this show at this ungodly hour, man.
And he was here early too.
It's way too early, man.
That's good.
That's the nature of the beast.
Thank you so much for being here, gentlemen.
No, you're welcome anytime.
We're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, it's to have that conversation with the Wildlife Conservation Society. So stay tuned.